Israeli Defense Minister Yoav Gallant has called for the government to halt its judicial overhaul legislation to allow for reform talks, just days after Prime Minister Netanyahu said the government would pass a key part of the proposed shakeup this week. In a televised address Saturday night, the Likud party member broke party lines, stressing Israel is facing great threats both near and far. Gallant cited the growing rift within the IDF of reservists refusing to report for military duty as the reason behind his decision to call for a freeze in legislation that has polarized the nation. The source of our strength is eroding, Gallant warned. This poses a clear, immediate, and tangible threat to the security of the state. 3 other Likud members backed his call for dialogue, while others slammed his, quote, surrender. Otzma Yehudit coalition party leader Itamar Ben-Gvir demanded that he be fired. Opposition leader Yair Lapid welcomed Gallant's plea as a brave and vital step. Take a listen to the defense minister's speech.
In recent days and weeks, during conversations and discussions behind the scenes, I presented the security situation to our various parties. I asked, reasoned, and said that at this time, the process must be stopped, so that we may sit and talk. But now, I declare loudly and publicly, for the sake of Israel's security, for the sake of our sons and daughters, the legislative process should be stopped in order to enable the nation of Israel to celebrate Passover and Independence Day together, and to mourn together on Memorial Day and Holocaust Remembrance Day. These are holy days for us.
Hundreds of thousands of Israelis took part in nationwide rallies Saturday evening for the 12th straight week of mass protests against the government's controversial judicial overhaul. The main demonstration was held in Tel Aviv, as you can see on your screens there, with some 200,000 people taking to the streets. Police used water cannons to disperse protesters, blocking traffic and detaining 32 people. Tens of thousands also attended protests in numerous other locations throughout the country, including major cities like Jerusalem, Haifa, and Beersheba. A total of 44 protesters were arrested across the nation. Saturday's demonstrations came ahead of a nationwide week of paralysis by protesters that begins today, intensifying the anti-government movement ahead of this week's vote on a bill to put key Supreme Court appointments directly in coalition control. And joining me in studio is I-24 News senior correspondent Owen Alterman and Ambassador Daniel Shek, former Israeli ambassador to France. Gentlemen, thank you both for joining me this morning. Owen, I want to start with you. Likud is now coming to a sort of split. Come the plenum vote on Tuesday, what do you think will happen? Will Gallant and the 3 other members of parliament that supported him, will they vote in favor of this bill?
Well, they may not vote as a block, Sarah. First of all, we should also mention that as we speak, the Constitution Committee at the Knesset is meeting ostensibly to vote this bill out of the committee so it can then get to the floor. Demonstrations, mess, chaos inside the hearing room, opposition lawmakers shouting, screaming, one standing up to read the Kaddish, the traditional Jewish prayer said as a mourning over one who died, to talk about the situation in terms of what's happening. So obviously that's a developing story. One would imagine that one way or another those votes would happen. In the committee, we should be clear, the coalition has the votes to get this out of committee. That's not the stumbling block from the coalition's perspective. It is, of course, in the plenum. Look, Sarah, you've heard me before. You've heard me since January. I have said that I do not believe that this package will pass in full. It's already, by the way, not passing in full. This is a different plan than had been put forward at the beginning. And one way or another, it would not pass. And I said at the beginning, we don't know how it will not pass. There are 1,001 ways in which it could not pass. And now we're learning more and more about which of those 1,001 paths will be taken. There are many developments over the course of the past 2 or 3 months that have not been particularly important, frankly, and have gotten more attention than they deserve. This is not one of them. The defense minister going before the cameras and saying what he did last night is a milestone event, right? And there is no turning back for Yoav Gallant. Frankly, there was no turning back even on Thursday, once this was already leaked and put out publicly and he was being attacked inside the Likud. There was no way back for him.
Well, he himself said he's willing to take the risk.
Absolutely. And now that he has crossed the Rubicon, if you will, there's no way back for him. He has no political way, put aside the merits, but no political way to march but forward. We have every expectation that if need be, he'll vote against this when it comes to the plenum. Again, this is a coalition for all of the celebration in the right-wing camp after November 1st and the victory in the elections. That still only has 64 out of 120 seats, only 4 votes to lose. Gallant is one of them. Are there 3 more? Again, a developing story. One of those potential 3, Avi Dichter from the Likud, has reportedly decided he will back the legislation, maybe because he would be able to inherit the defense portfolio from Yoav Gallant. Dichter is himself a former head of the Israeli Shin Bet, domestic intelligence service, so has that qualification. I still believe that one way or another there will not be 61 fingers to be raised or 61 fingers to press the green button in the Knesset come the final moment of truth and the vote on third reading. But exactly who is not going to vote and how it's going to happen, and as you correctly said, Sarah, what this means for Israel's ruling Likud party, where there are clearly grave divisions within that party, obviously all questions that we're going to have to keep our eyes out. And one last point. Don't forget the second thing you talked about. Hundreds of thousands, 200,000 Israelis out in the streets of Tel Aviv yesterday. A record number.
And
this is a protest movement that is gathering a tremendous amount of momentum, even 3 months on, the most consequential protest movement in Israel's history, I think by consensus. And that also is extremely important, not just for today's news cycle, but for weeks, months, years, maybe decades to come.
Ambassador, I want to get your take on the current crisis within, in general, in Israel, but also within the Likud party itself.
Where should we start? Look, there are 2 things that have emerged from this, from yesterday's sort of, kind of climax, with Yoav Gallant coming out as a clear opponent of the. Well, actually, not an opponent of the. He didn't say he's opposed to the.
He's not opposed to the reform.
He just wants to slow down, and he wants to. But here comes the first thing that one has to understand. Yariv Levin, the Minister of Justice, who is pushing this reform, always said, we cannot slow down because we will lose the momentum. Right. And if we lose the momentum, it's going to fall apart. And he's feeling that this is the breaking point where this might fall apart, that if he does agree or under duress has to postpone the votes by weeks until the Knesset comes back after the Passover break, that so many things can happen in these few weeks that it won't be able to reestablish it. What is going to happen in Likud is a question mark. Yoav Gallant made a first move. He is a leading member of Likud, and he has maybe the most prestigious portfolio in the Israeli cabinet, except for the prime minister. And he is faced also with the gravest problem in his own ranks, in his own army, in his own defense forces. He understands that this is coming to a boiling point, and he feels that he needed to warn and to come out and declare this. So the question is his move sufficiently forceful to carry with him a few other members of Likud and then deprive Yariv Levin of the 61 fingers to push the button? Or will he simply be sacrificed? We know that there are other members of the government and of Likud who are on the verge, who would love to find a context where they can oppose it. They understand that this is not good, but will they have the courage to do so, or will they simply look on while Yoav Gallant is sacrificed? That is the big question. Right. And the last point, just one last point about Avi Dichter. Avi Dichter, does he really want to become the defense minister under these circumstances? With revolt, close to revolt
after
within
he would have voted for the bill or allowed it to pass.
It's going to be a very tense week. I'm very nervous to see what happens. Ambassador, thank you very much for joining me. Senior correspondent Owen Alterman.